At long last, the video for the solar eclipse in Gemini that we had at 3:53 a.m. Pacific time earlier today. And as you know, I do my new moon solar eclipse videos or my new moon videos after the new moon. And this is going to be reaching you at just about the right time. Indeed, by the time I think you are either getting this or within another 12 hours or so, you're going to feel energized to start to move forward in some way and take some actions in some way. And all you need to do, as you always do with these new moon videos, or indeed more accurately the new moons, is pay attention to the 12 to 48 hours before the new moon. It isn't as if activity isn't happening, it's just that your own energy is going to be lower and sunk lower and less energy to do or to think or for things to materialize, etc. If something did materialize for about 48 hours prior to a new moon, it probably has to do with the prior new moon. So wherever Taurus sits in your chart, if something came through for you, excuse me, yesterday or day before yesterday, in the 48 hours prior to the new moon solar eclipse, then it very likely has to do with the Taurus part of your chart, because as the moon enters Gemini and gets ready to become a new moon in Gemini, the old cycle is still finishing off. So it's kind of, for people who understand more about astrology, it's as if the moon is going through its 12th house, and therefore sometimes with the 12th house completing things or delivering something to you as opposed to you taking action. You've taken all the action prior to the new moon, and so 48 hours before a new moon and within that time frame, sometimes the Taurus new moon in this case could be wrapping itself up, or the previous new moon could be wrapping itself up. New moon solar eclipse. Where is Gemini in your chart? What house does it occupy? What does that house stand for? It's possible that within the next 48 hours or even week, but for a lot of people within 48 hours, new things come to you. And I say new things with this particular new moon with a sense of caution because it's conjunct Mercury Retrograde. But let's just build this new moon solar eclipse video as we need to. Let's start with the fact that it's a new moon. New things will come to you as opportunities or things that you need to act on. The new moon brings vitality to this part of the chart and brings opportunity and starts a 28-day cycle. It is also a new moon solar eclipse, which means that along with the Taurus new moon a month ago, it is going to reach culmination with the Taurus lunar eclipse on November 19th, and indeed the Gemini full moon that follows after. The reason being, in the second half of 2021, the eclipses change signs or start the process of changing signs. The eclipses are currently in Gemini Sagittarius. We had the lunar eclipse in Sagittarius on May 26th. We had the solar eclipse in Gemini today. The next eclipse is a lunar eclipse in Taurus. The eclipses are moving to Taurus and Scorpio. But then we have one more new moon solar eclipse in Sagittarius on December the 3rd. And then in 2022, all the eclipses are in Taurus and Scorpio. I will continue to fill you in on those eclipses as we get closer to them. But a solar eclipse also starts about a 6-month cycle that is culminating in a lunar eclipse. So because the lunar eclipse is in Taurus, last month's new moon on May 11th is also going to be reaching culmination at that lunar eclipse, and as is the Gemini solar eclipse. Part of the Gemini energy will also reach culmination with the Gemini full moon, which will follow 28 days after the lunar eclipse in Taurus on November 19th. How's it going so far, kids? Stay with me. It gets simpler. So all of that is in action. New things. It's a solar eclipse where the North Node is. There are two types of eclipses: eclipses of leaning into and eclipses of releasing. This is an eclipse of leaning into. Even when you have to release, you have to lean into whatever you have to release. But this is an eclipse of opportunity. This is where your opportunities are going to come from. This is where your growth is going to come from. This is what you're required to pick up the knapsack and the staff or the sword or whatever it is that you're going to take with you, and your intuitive compass. And this is the eclipse that moves you forward, and that you are courageously asked to develop a set of skills in the Gemini portion of your chart that you may be weak in, but you may know and understand that you have to develop those skills in order to continue to grow, because your story is going to continue to develop based on the acquisition of these skills. And they have a sense of challenge, they have a sense of motivation and drive. It has an attractive energy. The only enemy is, or the only fly in the ointment is, that these are not skills that are already in your knapsack. These are not skills that you have already acquired and mastered. These are a new set of skills that you're being required to master. So it's great. It's a solar eclipse with the North Node. It's a gateway of opportunity, and it's going to be up to you to release old patterns and behaviors in the Sagittarius part of your chart and lean into the opportunities that are coming in the Gemini part of your chart, so that you can continue to grow. We'll continue to develop this. Now, it is in the sign of Gemini, and Geminian qualities, they're sort of a global requirement that we lean into Gemini qualities. I apologize for the doggy that is somewhere in this neighborhood and quite loud. Can you hear it? I will close my window. There we go. This is what happens when you do videos right next to a window. Window, peace at last. You guys could probably not hear it, but it was driving me crazy. It sounded like a Pomeranian. I hate yappy dogs. Yappy, yappy, yappy. I'm just like, I need a dog with presence. Now, yappy dogs have presence too, you know, of a different kind, but it's not the kind of presence that I'm after. We're going to let that dog yap and hope it finds peace and quiet and contentment. So, new moon solar eclipse in Gemini. Geminian qualities to be developed. What are Gemini qualities? Communication, community, the immediate environment, talking and listening, facts, information, data, leaning into feedback, inquisitiveness. It also spills into, when we come to the Gemini part of the chart, your community, your neighborhood, your routine, the people you meet on your day-to-day routine. I like to use the term the well we live in, the well you live in, and if every morning you wake up and you go and get a cup of coffee from Starbucks, the barista community there, and from there, if you go and do something else before you head to work, and then if you're at work, and that is your community, you know, your neighborhood. And the neighborhood isn't just defined by where your apartment is, because you may spend very limited time in your apartment or your house, but it is the neighborhood and the community that you interact with on a day-to-day basis, that you get information from. Gossip, chatter, communication, writing, talking, skill acquisition, resumes, sales. Traditionally, siblings and relatives and cousins, because they would very much classically have been part of your community. People lived close to their relatives and their siblings. As we said, neighborhoods, schools, things like that. Also commuting, cars, vehicles, commuting, not long distance travel, short distance travel. There's a need to pay attention to community and communication for opportunities and where our growth may lie. I've talked about the sign for the benefit of the folks who do not know their chart and may not know which house Gemini occupies. The house and what it stands for is more important than the sign. So if you know where Gemini sits in your chart, what house it occupies, that is where you need to focus, what that house stands for and what the opportunities are within it, and how the eclipses, which move backwards through a horoscope, where are they coming from and where are they going? And so where does Gemini fit into the story? I'm trying to cater to people with an interest in astrology sort of as wide as possible in these videos. This new moon solar eclipse is conjunct Mercury retrograde. Indeed, a few hours after the new moon solar eclipse, a retrograde Mercury conjuncted the sun, combusted into the sun, was reborn by burning itself off within the sun's rays to, if the sun is here, then Mercury retrograde meets up with the sun and continues back. And indeed, today, it started a new Mercury cycle in the sign of Gemini that will last till October the 9th. So A new project has started, dear ones. And it doesn't always start with the new moon or a new moon solar eclipse. It's just starting today because Mercury was also conjunct the sun today. A retrograde Mercury was conjunct the sun today. A new project of activity, of communication-related activity has started where the sign of Gemini is in your chart, what house it occupies, and what that house stands for. Again, a bit of information for those people for whom this will mean something. Now, it's conjunct to Mercury retrograde. Now, this is where it becomes really fascinating. This eclipse has an eye towards the future, but it also has an eye towards the back. And all day I wanted to get to doing this video, and it was a reading an astrology rich day for me, kind of a little bit suddenly in the way, and a little unpredictably in the way that communications and readings and conversations came up. The one theme that I have been noticing over the past week consistently in my readings is that there's something about knowing when to get off a dead horse. That's a common thread. Now, when do you know a horse is dead? A horse is dead when there's no passion here in your heart, when something is being dealt with and it is energetically dead. When you know that's, because it's the North Node of leaning into, there's something that needs to be released, and we often know instinctively that we are riding a dead horse and we should get off of it, but there's a lot that goes into when to dismount, when to make sure it's really dead. Is it really dead? Do I feel anything for this? Is there anything still remaining? Should I stay? Should I go? There's something about getting clear about which horse or horses you've been riding that are dead and how to move forward. Not easy. And with Mercury retrograde till June the 22nd, there's a need to be in an investigative space around past issues to do with the theme that has been attached to this particular eclipse cycle on May the 22nd and today, deception. The new moon solar eclipse, the sun, the moon, because at the time of the new moon, the sun and the moon are together, Mercury retrograde, square Neptune in Pisces. At the time of the full moon lunar eclipse on May the 22nd, the full moon squared Jupiter in Pisces, and Venus squared Neptune in Pisces. Relationship, financial, deception, delusion, manipulation, gaslighting, and also, this is a word I have not used in these videos before, maybe a bit of martyrdom, loose boundaries. Now, this new moon solar eclipse is ruled by the planet Mercury because it is in Gemini, and Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and a retrograde Mercury is playing a massive role with this new moon solar eclipse. But Neptune is also the ruler of Pisces. So you have these two well-placed planets that are squaring off of each other. And as I've mentioned in these videos before, the slower planet is somehow dependent on the faster moving planets to do their job. Now, Mars squared Mercury at some point over the last month and a half. Venus squared Mercury at the time of the full moon lunar eclipse. Sorry, let me just rephrase that. Mars squared Neptune somewhere over the past month and a half. Venus squared Neptune on the full moon lunar eclipse. Mercury has already squared Neptune twice. Once, the second time on June the 5th. And then on June the 22nd, it goes direct. And on July the 6th, it squares Neptune for the last time. The reason why I'm mentioning these squares is if you are dealing with some sort of issue that goes back to 2015 and 2016, some sort of crisis in 2015, 2016, where does Pisces sit in your chart? What house does it occupy? What does that house stand for? if you're dealing with some sort of a crisis there, as I mentioned in my recent Jupiter and Pisces video, Jupiter over the summer is trying to give you an inkling that it is trying to create some healing or an auspicious new beginning there. But in order to create an auspicious new beginning, some old energy needs to be retired. And this would be energy around a crisis, either related to some kind of loss. Neptune dissolves boundaries. It has a tendency to, it is a highly exalted spiritual planet. And sort of high exaltations of spirituality dissolves material concerns and takes you away from material reality, where you are encouraged through Neptunian spiritual practice to be in touch with God or in touch with spirit or the ultimate reality or the one reality, and to make that supreme over everything else, which of course means that you're sort of in the space of renunciation. But most of us don't have that luxury and may not be into renunciation. So dealing with renunciation energy can always be a little bit complicated. It's highly spiritual, it's highly involved. There could be, for people who are romantically involved or where romance plays a role in this, highly attractive, exalted kind of romantic vibes as well. You know, very electric and very turn-on-y. I'm trying to use words that won't get me slapped on YouTube. But at the same time, with an element of delusion and dissolving oneself into it, you know, very, very attractive and cool. But when push comes to shove and you got to get real, then you got to get real. Then you got to know whether there's anything real there or not, apart from this magical feeling of oneness. And the same magical feeling of oneness that might be so attractive to someone like Rumi or the Bhakti poets in India, who are all about having a love affair with their gods and spirit. If you are into sitting on a pavement and bringing out your instrument and singing to the Lord, then some of this energy is going to work really well for you. But the rest of us, not quite there yet. So the Neptunian energy is a little bit challenging. Now, Neptune will, if something is, I'm going to tell you something more and more, the older I get, both in my own life and the life of others around me, and as I read charts, it really does feel like, especially when it comes to financial or material matters, it feels like it's already set what someone is going to earn during their lifetime and what someone is going to expend during their lifetime. And if you don't earn it one way, the universe will find a way of you earning it another way. And if you don't expend it one way, the universe will find another way of you expending it. And it almost feels like what's going to come out and come in and what's going to go out are already somehow written, and it's just part of this lifetime in a game that Spirit plays to see how it's going to balance that ledger. A long-winded way of saying what is not meant for you will be dissolved, and Neptune will somehow take it away, and it's going to be hard for you to get a sense of why that is good or helpful, especially when it might be something that you are attached to and don't really feel like giving up. At the same time, when planets are squaring Neptune and when you're dealing with Neptunian energy, you do want to be sure that you are not being manipulated and that the loss isn't greater than what it needs to be. And if you're not feeling particularly charitable about giving it up, I don't think there's anything wrong with putting up a fight. So, because ultimately, you've still got to engage with, if you have decided that you are not in the renunciation space right now, then by all means, I would actually encourage you to be sure and be clear that where boundaries need to be drawn, they should be drawn. Some of this deception energy is real, thievery, deception. Some of it is people withholding information, smoke and mirrors, kind of trickstery energy. Some of it is us deceiving ourselves and having a certain amount of mental fogginess. Neptune is not clear with facts. Pisces is not a fact-based sign. So that's where the gaslighting can come in as well if someone is putting smoke and mirrors. A lot of this energy with investigation, as I've mentioned in previous videos recently, is around determining whether you are dealing with a bee or a bumblebee or a wasp or a grizzly. With a bee or a bumblebee, that's my grizzly. That's my grizzly symbol, my grizzly persona. So you've got to figure out whether, because, if it's a bee or a wasp, you don't want to get stung, but you can try and find a way to get it out of the room, of the house, or the apartment, or open a window. But if it's a grizzly, we're talking about a different set of tools and a different set of strategies. So because we're talking about Mercury retrograde and because we're talking about leaning into the Gemini part of the chart, I think that conversations, leading with data, information, or conversations to determine what is real and what is not real is going to be helpful. Your intuition is going to be helpful as a guide, but somewhere, I was going to title this video Investigate. That shouldn't be a surprise to you if you've been following my other videos. But there was also a part of me that wants to title it The Search for Clarity. It might prove to be an elusive search for clarity. But asking the questions and the search for clarity is going to yield something that once Mercury goes direct on June the 22nd, and especially as you head into July and towards that July the 6th date, you might find that, especially after June the 25th or so, when Mercury starts to pick up steam, that you're in a place where you're really ready to act on things. If there are decisions being made now, it's very likely that when Mercury goes direct after June the 22nd, you will have to revisit them. So it's best not to, if you can avoid it, sign something, or unless you have Mercury retrograde in your chart, then I think you can truly afford to be decisive, because you might just feel really clear and decisive about things right now. Good for you, because you have Mercury retrograde in your chart. For once, you're in sync with the world. Good for you. But for other people, it's likely that if you, for example, I do have to make a decision on something and sign something in, when Mercury is retrograde. And there's a part of me that's just looking at it. It's, I know that something about it is going to shift and change and will need to be relooked at. Okay, at least I know it, and I'm doing my best to ask the questions that I need to, and I'm letting the process take its course. But where you can avoid decision-making and stay in the place of the need for clarity, be careful how you word things and how you communicate during this time, because you may be unclear. Emails might go to the wrong person. There may be communication snafus. Some of them could be embarrassing. Also, you want to watch the light. You want to, with Mercury retrograde, look at the facts and the data and what you're going to say and what you're going to write 3 times and make sure that it's going to the right place and all those kind of Mercury retrograde things. The other thing about this new moon solar eclipse is that the week before and after the solar eclipse, today is important, and August the 10th, the date 2 months after the solar eclipse and the week before and after, also become important. The sign of Leo after Gemini is kind of interesting and important because there are a few things that happen in Leo, particularly a Mars and Venus conjunction, that are intriguing. We'll talk more about them as we get to that point. The squaring energy with Neptune and the fact that Venus squared Neptune, what's going on with relationships and money, and Mercury itself does 3 squares with Neptune. There's no question that it's an investigation of kind of deceptive energy here. The theme of martyrdom becomes important because sometimes if under Neptune's influence, we may feel conflict averse. And we may feel conflict averse because if you don't have the facts, you don't know how to go about fighting something. It's like, what am I fighting? Am I fighting phantoms? Are the phantoms in my mind? What's going on here? And, that's the kind of energy. And someone is leaning into it because they're going to be doing that to you. Kind of like, what's going on here? One-upmanship. I swear to God right now with the astrology, it's as if we're all playing chess with each other. It's like we're all playing poker. Because everyone's being Neptuned somewhere right now with these squares. So there's just, confusion is in the air everywhere. And everyone's like kind of playing chess and not showing their hand, and the confusion is only adding to it. So that's why this kind of gentle but clear investigative, and you're going to be in it. Within the next 48 hours, I wouldn't be surprised that you don't feel the urge, and the urge doesn't swell in you to start to take some action, have some conversation, or prepare to get moving. When transits align, it really becomes a question on whether we tap into that energy and follow through into action. And I'm not saying take reckless action, because that's not going to be helpful. So just examine what it is that with this new moon feels like. It's going to be a mix of energy. Certain things are just going to be clean, flat out opportunities, new cycles starting, where Gemini sits in your chart pulling you forward. And certain things are going to have a look to the back, to the rear of you. A set of energies that are demanding conclusion, that are demanding that you make peace with them. But as is always the case in life, my dears, you have to fight for peace. So, some aspect of this kind of investigating, a square is a conflict. You know, it's two cars at a stop sign going, who's going first? And the important thing is it's the Gemini planets that move, because they're the faster moving ones. So Neptune can continue to do what needs to be done.